Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how I set up my Raspberry Pi 4. I'm going to install Raspberry Pi OS, which used to be called Raspbian. I'm also going to show you how to find the IP address of my Raspberry Pi 4 on the network and how to connect to it using SSH. I'm going to do this from Ubuntu Linux, Mac OS X, Windows 10, my iPad, and my Android phone. So here goes. We're going to start out by installing. We're going to write Raspberry Pi OS to the SD card. So I'm going to switch over to that right now. All right. So here we are on the downloads page, and I'm downloading the image, or I'm downloading the imager tool from raspberrypi.org. And here I'm attempting to install it by just double-clicking on it and bringing up this this software tool that came up by default. And it's asking me to put in my password. It's going to fail, and it's saying it's because it's from an unsigned repo. And rather than mess around with it, I just opened up a terminal. I cut out a whole section where I poked around with that, but it wasn't worth the effort. And So here I'm just opening up a terminal, going to my downloads directory, and I'm just running sudo dpackage-i and then the package name. And so there we go. Type in my password, and that works really easily. Much more easy than messing around with all that packaging software that comes on Ubuntu, which I've never had an issue with in the past. But anyways, I figured it wasn't worth the effort to mess around with. So anyways, this is the tool that I've launched here. This is the Raspberry Pi imager tool, and it lets you write images to. You actually don't even have to download them separately unless it's something that's not included in this list here. But basically, you get all of these things here in this list, and you just select your image, and then you select the SD card you want it to write to, and it just writes to it for you. You just image SD card and then hit go, and it's just done. That's it. It's basically the most simple, easy thing you could possibly do. There are other cards that are, other software tools that are equally as easy as this, but yeah, this one, you just hit write and you're good. And it will download the software if it isn't there. So if the images, the image for Raspberry Pi OS wasn't there, it's going to download it for you. And I believe I had this downloaded already, so I didn't have to pull it down. But if you didn't have it pulled down already, it'll pull it down for you, and that'll take a bit longer to download. And so that process that you watched, and then you just hit continue, that whole process took about 8 minutes or more. Here's me pulling the SD card out, and we are ready to boot up. So this is my sort of new Raspberry Pi 4, and I've just got it up and running with Raspbian, which was really, really easy. And so you'll notice, if you saw my other video, you'll have noticed that I had put this in a case before, and I've taken it out of the case for the time being because I'm going to play around with it and try to attach camera to this connection right here. So this is the CSI connection, and I'm going to connect the Noir camera version 2. I've already put some heat sinks on here that I had another video where I showed how I put the heat sinks on. They are not aligned correctly, and I didn't want to rip them off and reposition them, so I'm leaving them like that for the time being. So I had also run, I was running RISC-OS on this. I tested RISC-OS on this. It didn't work on this, but it worked on my Pi 3. So I am going to, so this is my first time booting this up with Linux and not RISC-OS. I've only booted this with RISC-OS so far. So now we're running Linux. We're running Raspberry Pi OS, which is basically Linux with a customized desktop. And let's see here. And I apologize about how the screen looks. This would look a whole lot nicer if I were just capturing my screen, but I wanted to get the physical Pi in there also. Now, the plan is to poke around the UI and see how things are for a little bit. I'm not going to record that, but unless I come up upon something really interesting. But I'm going to poke around, check it out, and then I'm going to configure it to connect to my Wi-Fi network, and then I am going to I'm going to disconnect the keyboard and monitor and just run it on Wi-Fi and access it remotely. So my immediate plans are to I'm going to test out the camera on this and then after testing the camera, I would I'm going to do a separate video where I test out the camera. Then I'm going to start working on some projects with the GPIO pins. So like the first one, I'm just going to make a LED blink. So I'm going to be putting that video out really soon, and I'm going to try to go through as many different projects as I can, and just do as much as I can with this thing. So that's what's in the future for this device, and I'm probably going to buy a couple other cameras to test them out. So I got the the Raspberry Pi Noir camera. It's an IR camera. I'm curious as to how it actually performs, but I want to compare it to the high quality camera and the standard camera. So I just want to try all of those. So I'm going to probably pick those up as well. So far I only have this camera. I had some ancient webcams that were really low quality that I used many years ago that they're probably not even worth using, but I happen to have those. Anyways, so yeah, that's that. I'm going to poke around the UI here, and then I'm going to get it set up on the network, and that's all the playing around I'm going to do on this for now. Well, actually, I technically might leave it connected to the monitor to test out the camera, but very shortly I'll be taking this. I'll just be connecting to this remotely over the network using either VNC or SSH. But now that I think of it, it might be better. I might get a better demo of the camera if I just have it with a monitor directly connected to it. So we'll see. And yeah, it wants to lead me through some things. This is my first time logging in. It logged in without a user and password. I'm going to have to configure that and some other things. But yeah, the basic configuration stuff I'm going to do. It comes with some things like some IDEs, comes with Chromium, VLC, image viewer, a bunch of accessories. You would probably want to add some things. You'd probably want to add some software if you're doing any real work on here. But yeah, it has a whole bunch of nice stuff, and I'm going to play around with it now. So that's about as much as I wanted to show. So I'm connecting my Raspberry Pi 4 to the network, and I'm going to connect it to my Wi-Fi network. And apparently this is a whole lot easier than I had thought. And I know that you can go into the configuration and change it, or you can edit text files. But this is my experience running Raspberry Pi OS right now. So here's my Pi, and it's connected to this monitor here. And the first time I logged in, before even having a password set, it brings up this configuration wizard where you set up your keyboard, your time zone, and you change your password and all that. And it comes up with this little wizard saying, hey, do you want to connect to a network? So that makes it ridiculously easy. And I'm going to go ahead and just connect to my Wi-Fi network. So let's see, going to connect to this guy, and I guess just go to next, and I'm going to put the password in, and I should be connected in just a minute. Let me come right back to this. And let's click next, and there we go. And I know this is the most educational thing because I'm just using the wizard, but and I'll probably do more future videos covering all the other ways you could do it too. And I believe I have an article out on how to do this. And that's it. My Wi-Fi is configured. It is now, before I even continue with this, I think I'm going to just check out my Wi-Fi. So it looks like, oh, there we go. Now it shows all. You can just configure it through the GUI like this. I should really do a separate video, and I probably will, so stay tuned. I'm going to do a separate video on how to configure Wi-Fi from the command line and how to do everything else from the command line and so on. And I'll probably just try to get all my bases covered and try to make a video that covers everything for everyone, but not today. Today I'm just going over the basic default install if you happen to have a keyboard and monitor connected. And once you've done this and you enable SSH, you should be able to reach your Pi over the network. And I have a separate article, and I'll probably do a video on this too, of how to find your Pi on the network once it's connected to the network. So you would connect it to the network, enable SSH, and then you would connect to the network from another machine like your laptop, and you would have to find your Raspberry Pi. And you usually do that just by port scanning or checking the ARP table or something like that. I have a whole article on that. I'm going to do a separate video on how to find your Pi on the network after you've connected it. But you do need to have Wi-Fi enabled, and you do need to enable SSH. So I am connected. Let me just launch a browser before I even finish this setup wizard over here. I just want to launch a browser, and let's see how fast this Pi actually is, how fast it can initially launch a browser. I guess it's not too slow, but it's not, super fast or anything. So there we go. It's going to raspberrypi.org on the internet. It's not locally saved or anything. So let's see. Let's just go to Google. Let's just load Google. And I'm typing with one hand because I'm holding the camera with the other. But there we go. That's as fast as I can type one-handed. Let's see if it. There we go. Google. So yeah, there's some nice confirmation that Chromium is loading and able to connect to the internet that easily. So I have my Pi. Is this little device right here, and this guy is running this desktop and connected to the internet. And what else? What else should I will probably tack on how to enable SSH to this video also. And you could probably do it manually, but they wanted to make things convenient with the Pi. So instead of doing it manually or however you do it with another Linux distro, on Raspberry Pi OS, they just have a configuration option to enable SSH. So, yeah, let me try opening another Chromium window just to see if this opens up way fast. Yeah, see, that was way fast. Just the initial launch, and even on a big, strong, powerful machine, it can be slow to launch Chrome initially because it shouldn't be like that. I think it's wrong, but that's just how it is. And I think every time I launch a new instance, it's slightly more resources than adding a new tab. Like adding a new tab is just click, there's your tab, there's your tab. Yeah, so anyways, opening up a new instance is, I don't know if that creates a new process and a tab doesn't. I thought tabs did, but anyways. Yeah, so it's not too slow or anything. This is very much usable as a desktop. And what else? This is, I'm probably going to add this video. This is going to be a separate video, how to connect to the network, but I'm also going to include this in my first impressions video from of the Raspberry Pi running Raspbian, or a Raspberry Pi OS, which used to be called Raspbian. So that's it. I'm going to continue on with my with the wizard and come back. I'm going to add another snippet to this video showing how to enable SSH. Right, so the final thing you would probably want to do when you enable SSH on this, it's ridiculously easy. You basically go up here, and you could do this manually too on the command line or whatever. But basically, it's all built into the Raspberry Pi because they wanted it to be a convenient educational tool and all that. So basically, you go down here you go to Preferences on your Raspberry Pi menu, go to Raspberry Pi Configuration, and they have all sorts of nice stuff in one place. And it's really simple. So you can change your host name, which I'm going to do. I am going to have it not auto login. And what else? Network at boot. We don't want it to wait for the network. All right, so if you go over to interfaces, and it doesn't look like this has a general network configuration, but either case, that doesn't matter. We will go, we see here we have SSH. So all we have to do is click enable for SSH. You'll notice there's some other things on here like VNC. I'm not adding VNC for now because I don't need it now. And I think you can get to the same configuration tool or a text-based version of this from the command line, and I'll probably try that when I connect with SSH. But for now, it's for now I'm just going to use the graphical version, and this just does a lot of the work for you automatically. But you'll notice if you want to use the camera interface, you click enable here, and that enables the Raspberry Pi camera board, and that's for like that's for when I'm going to plug the camera in here. And then clicking enable, I'm not going to do it for now, but later I'll come back and enable the camera. And that's how you would enable the camera to test that out. So for now, I'm enabling SSH so that I can connect to this over the network. Hey guys, so we're going to find our Raspberry Pi on the network. We're going to find the IP address of our Raspberry Pi, and then we're going to connect to it remotely using SSH. So we're not going to use VNC in this video today, so no remote desktop, but we're going to connect to it with SSH. So first thing you might want to do, this is not what I would do first to find the IP of the Raspberry Pi. Well, very first thing you want to make sure is that you're on the same network. So I'm connected to TreeFrog 5G. That's the same network that my Raspberry Pi is on. Now, if I were connected to a different AP or wired or something other than what my Raspberry Pi is connected to, I won't see it. So just make sure you're on the right network, otherwise you'll have none of this will work. All right, so one thing you can do is you can say IP-A, or rather, sorry, ARP-A, And this is going to give you all of the MAC addresses and IP address mappings on your local network. So it's basically your ARP cache. And off the top of my head, I happen to know this is the IP address of my Raspberry Pi. But basically, you would have to try each of these to identify which is your Pi. So based on this output, but this gives you everything connected to your network right now, and this one is my Pi right here. But if you don't want to do that, there are this is not the first thing that I would do. I would use Nmap to find it. Oh yeah, and if you don't have the ARP command, like I don't on this version of Ubuntu, you can install it. You can install NetTools, and there's a newer equivalent to this tool. But you can say sudo apt install net-tools, and you're gonna get the ARP tool. So after that, you want to we're gonna use Nmap, but before we use Nmap, we need to see what network we're on. So we can say IPA, and that shows us, all right, so our wireless network that we're connected to, our IP address is 192.168.0.110, and that's pretty standard for a network with DHCP. So we just need to know the network. So we know our host is 110. Let's see here. We could also do ifconfig -a, and that also gives us the same output. There's our IP address. I actually think this is easier output to read, and you get the ifconfig command if you install NetTools. Now that used to be standard on all Linux distributions. Not so much anymore. They are replacing it with the newer NetTools, so you're going to use the IPA command. So anyways, moving right along here, pop open, well, all right, so let's start just running, we're going to run Nmap from the command line. Now, notice our IP this is our IP, so we want to search this network, right? So to search this network, we're going to run Nmap first from the command line, and then we're going to run it with a GUI called Nmap. So we're basically going to run through the whole network from end to the beginning. So we're going to, this is the network, and it's going to start from, the last IP to number 1. So let's try running this command real quick right now. So Nmap our network. So paste that in, and I am not getting anything. So that's unfortunate. Anyways, let's bring up Nmap. And I'm not running it as root, so I'm going to be missing some things, but that's okay. So I'm going to paste that same command in here, and let's see how this works for us. So one address scanned in. All right, so yeah, looks like we have to, I was specifying that in the wrong order. You can't go from end to beginning. You have to go from beginning to end. So, start at 1 and go to 255. So put your network and then the host range. So this first part is your network, and then this is your host range. So we run Nmap, and that scans our whole network. This is a little bit nicer because you can see host names. So you can see, like, this is the gateway, which is not hard to guess because it's number 1. We can see this host is named Pikachu, so it did some host resolution. That's the laptop I'm on right now. And the host that, our Raspberry Pi, it's still not telling us that it's a Pi, but that's this one right here at the bottom. But that narrows it down a little bit more. So let's paste this same command, copy it, and paste it right in here. So paste that in there, and hit scan. So we did the scan from the command line, and now we're running it from the, it takes a little bit longer when it's actually working. But yeah, run it, and there we go. There's our output, and this is our Raspberry Pi here. Now, if we didn't know that already, we would probably be checking this IP and these two IPs in addition to this one, but this is the one, this is actually our IP. We could rule out the gateway and our laptop, obviously. So that's how you find your Raspberry Pi on the network, assuming you're running Linux. We're going to do the same tutorial for Windows, Mac OS, and Android also. So we can kill this for now. And so let's jump over here to, yeah, and this is my little write-up that I put. Check the link in the description. The link in the description is actually going to point to this site right here. And this is the write-up I did on how to find the IP address of your Raspberry Pi, so probably some useful commands. There's not a whole lot here. It's pretty quick and easy. But yeah, let's minimize that for now. So a couple other things to mention. All right, so let's say if you didn't happen to have Nmap installed already, you can run, normally you can just run sudo apt install Nmap, and then Zenmap, the GUI you can install with sudo apt install Zenmap. Once those are in, and I had trouble installing Zenmap on Ubuntu 20.04, so I basically had to pull it down because they removed it from the repository since it relies on Python 2. So I had to pull it down from the old repo. I pulled down Python 2 and Zenmap using these commands. Then I did an apt install of both of these packages that were in my directory. Now, don't just run this command with the wildcard if you happen to have other packages in your repository. And then run, yeah, so that's it. This is how I did install NetTools. And yeah, so that's pretty much everything related to Zenmap and finding your Raspberry Pi. Now we're going to connect to it over the network. And you'll see I'm actually already connected to my Raspberry Pi over here. I did an SSH Pi, and I'm still using the Pi user. So Pi at IP address, and this is the IP address that we found before. And the first time you connect, it's going to say, hey, we don't recognize this host. So you're going to have to say yes if it's the first time connecting. If it's not the first time, then something strange is going on. If it doesn't recognize it after the first time you've connected, first time you connect, it's going to say, hey, we don't recognize the fingerprint. Sure, you want to continue. You know it's the first time you've connected, so just say yes. And it's going to ask for your password, put in your password, and you are connected to the Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to exit out of this and just show you how you connect to the Raspberry Pi. So let's say I'm out of here. Now, I'm logged in on my desktop. So you just run SSH and then username at IP address. And this is how you SSH to your Pi. So SSH to it, type in your password. Boom. And there we go. We're logged into our Raspberry Pi. So yeah, running Raspbian, this is us logged into our Raspberry Pi. So that is as easy as it is to connect to your Pi from Linux. So I'm running Ubuntu Linux to connect to my Pi, and I'm going to show you also how to do this on Android, iOS, and also Windows and Mac OS. So I'm going to have all of this stuff covered in the video. So I may make this a video by itself, but I'm definitely going to also have a video where I show you all of those other operating systems, and I'm going to probably combine them all into one video also. So thanks for watching. Hey guys, today we're going to learn how to, we're going to learn how to connect to a Raspberry Pi from a Mac. So we're running OS X on a MacBook Pro here, and we're going to use this to SSH into our Raspberry Pi. So first we need to be able to find the IP address of our Raspberry Pi on the network, and then we're going to SSH into it using the terminal. So if you look over here, I have it displayed right here. The IP is 192.168.0.231. Now before you do any of this, you're going to want to make sure you're on the same network as your Raspberry Pi, in this case, the same Wi-Fi network. So if you see here, I'm connected to TreeFrog 5G. So that's the same wireless network my Raspberry Pi is on. So I had some issues with the OS X network utility you see down here, and I ended up deciding not to use that, and I just downloaded the first free tool that I found on the App Store, and that ended up being this tool that they just call IP Scanner. So that's not a very brandable name, and it doesn't really set it apart. It's kind of a generic name, just says what it does. But this is the icon for it over here, and this is the name and the version. So you should be able to find that pretty easily on the App Store. Just search for Port Scanner on the App Store, and you'll find this. But you'll notice it shows my Raspberry Pi here, and this is the IP address I just read off. And the neat thing is that this actually, like a lot of port scanners, you have to specify the IP range and the ports and all sorts of parameters. With this, you don't have to specify the network or anything. I didn't even have to click a button for it to start going. I basically just so yeah, I didn't even click a button for it to start. Basically, as soon as I launched this application, as soon as I launched the application, it basically started scanning IP addresses on my network. It just decided which network to use, because there only really was one network, and it just started scanning and finding devices, which was pretty nice. And it also identified it as a Raspberry Pi right here, and it does that based on primarily based on the MAC address, I believe. But that was pretty nice. Some port scanners don't do that. They just tell you the IPs. Some do, some don't. So, but this was actually pretty nice. I like this. It makes it really obvious which one is the Raspberry Pi. So I would recommend this tool. Anyways, so now that we know the IP, we can put it over here in our terminal, which I already have open. And let me just make this a little bit bigger. I apologize if you are if you're watching this on your phone or something. This will probably be harder to see the screen, but all of that would have been kind of difficult. But you probably get the idea of what's going on. But if you're watching on a PC, I think you're probably fine. Anyways, so SSH into it, we basically say SSH. After opening up a terminal. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. If you happen to not be familiar with the terminal or the command line on Mac OS, not all Mac users are. It's this app here at the bottom called Terminal. If you don't have it, just go to the Launchpad and you'll find it in here pretty easily. Every Mac should have it. So anyways, open up your terminal, and it'll be a different color for you by default unless you've configured it. But for me, I've got this green on black, but it's the same app. But anyways, once you're in your terminal, you type SSH to use secure shell, and then you type the IP address you're trying to SSH into. In this case, it's the IP address of our Raspberry Pi. So hit enter, and now it comes up with this little warning saying, hey, we don't recognize the fingerprint for this host. And the reason it does that is because this is the first time we're connecting to the host. Now, the second time we connect to it, it'll recognize. So we're going to say yes. And now we type in our password. We say, there we go. So, and in this, hold on. Oh yeah. So I should have, yeah, so I'm doing that wrong. Anyways, the second time you log in, it's not going to show that. I failed this time, but the second successful time, I'll show you. So the first thing I did wrong was I have to specify the user that I'm logging in as. So you say pi at. So whatever your username is, you say username at IP address or host name. So username at IP address or username at IP or the host. Yeah, basically after the @ sign, you'll either have a host name or an IP address, and the username comes before the @ sign. So this is what the syntax looks like for that. So just hit enter and type in the password. And I think I did type that in wrong. I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. Again, so let's see here. I typed my normal password instead of my Raspberry Pi password. And there you go. You see we're logged into our Raspberry Pi. Now I'm going to exit out of here and SSH back into this. And you'll notice the second time SSHing back in, it's not bringing up that thing about the fingerprint because it's already recorded the fingerprint. It's not the first time, so it recognizes the host. And the reason that's important is, like, say if someone were trying to impersonate your server on the network to steal your password or something, they might do that, and the fingerprint wouldn't match. And if the fingerprint doesn't match after you've already connected to the host before, that might be like a red flag that someone's trying to impersonate your server. You might have a hacker on your network or something. But in this case, it's just because and the first time we logged in, it's just because we don't have the fingerprint to begin with. And other things that can come up might be like you cleared out your known hosts file on your system or something like that. But there are other reasons that can come up. But anyways, when it says that, just say yes. And so here I am SSH'd into my Raspberry Pi from my Mac. And so we can say like uname-a, and we can confirm, yeah, this is Linux running on our Raspberry Pi. This is the processor and architecture and all that. Uptime, you see it's been up for 3 days. It's just sitting there plugged in, connected to my Wi-Fi. No keyboard and monitor. I'm just connecting to it remotely from like all my different devices. Let's see, what else should we look at? Cat proc CPU info. Yeah, this shows our information about our CPUs. We got four cores on here, running an ARM version 7 processor. The actual name of the processor, let's see if it, I believe this is the system on a chip, and it's not actually telling us the actual name of our processor. Anyways, it doesn't matter for now. Yeah, this just shows our processor information. I'm basically just poking around in on the CLI for now. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. We're logged into our Pi. Say if you wanted to like edit code or something, you'd say edit our, this is the code, the Python code that makes our LED blink. So you can do all this from the command line with your logged in remotely over SSH on the command line. So you can write code to make your LED blink or control your Raspberry Pi or do whatever you want. You can also get a remote desktop on your Raspberry Pi using VNC, but we're not going to cover that in this video. In any case, one thing I should mention is to, before you attempt to SSH into your Raspberry Pi, you're going to want to make sure you have it set up on the network, and you're going to want to make sure you have enabled SSH on your Raspberry Pi. Now, I'm making this video as a standalone video by itself, but I'm also going to include this video as part of a much larger video on how to set up your Pi. And the much larger video is going to, in that video, I'm going to show you how to actually, configure your Pi on the network and enable SSH on your Raspberry Pi. But so if you're watching this clip on the standalone video just for how to do this on a Mac, then you won't see that part. But if you're watching this video as part of the larger video, then you will have probably already watched how to enable SSH on your Pi. So depending on which one you're on, you might want to go back and check the other video. So if you're on the Mac only video, you might want to check the video for all the platforms, because at the beginning of that, I show you how to actually enable SSH on your Pi. Unless you already know how to do that, and in which case you're covered. Hey guys, today we're going to find the IP address of our Raspberry Pi, and we are going to SSH to the Raspberry Pi. So we're going to make a remote connection to it. So, and we're not going to SSH using this terminal. This is just the old-fashioned Windows command prompt. It's not even PowerShell. We're not going to be using PowerShell. We're going to be using Putty, and we're going to be using Nmap to find the device. So I already have Nmap installed, and I'm not going to show you how to install that in this video, but I am going to show you how to install Putty. So let's see here. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you're on the same network as your Raspberry Pi, whether that be wireless or wired. So in this case, I'm on Wi-Fi because I'm on my Windows laptop. So we're going to connect to our we're going to SSH to our Raspberry Pi from our Windows laptop to using SSH. So I've already done this same video for Android and for Linux, and I'm also going to do it for iOS and also for Mac OS. So and I don't know which order I'm going to post them in, and I may very well just combine all these videos together. So anyways, the first thing, after you make sure you're on the correct network, which in this case is TreeFrog 5G, so that's the same network my Raspberry Pi is on, you're going to check your IP address. So do ipconfig, and in this case my IP is 192.168.0.110. So the network is basically pretty much expected. Like, this is the default for most private networks. So your home Wi-Fi probably gives you this network, and it could give you something else, so just check in case. And there are, like, I have configured things differently in the past, but and this last bit is the actual, this is the full IP for my host. So anyways, so 110 is my laptop. Now, that's important. Let me see if I can remember the switches for this. So step one, we're going to find our Raspberry Pi using Nmap. So let me see if this gives me a quick, let me see if this doesn't have any built-in scans. So let me see, actually it does. It has port scans right here. So ping scan, there we go, SN for ping scan. I could have sworn it was SP, but anyways, 192.168.0. Yeah, that didn't work out because my, all right. We just want a regular old ping scan. All right, so, and numlock needs to be on. All right, here we go. 192.168.0.1-255. So we're giving it the range of IPs. So you give it the network and then the the starting and the ending. So you can specify all IPs from 1 to 255 this way. So all the IPs on this network, we're going to scan them. So I'm going to hit scan. So that's why we looked up our IP address. So even though we're trying to find my Raspberry Pi, I look up my own IP address first, just to find out what network I'm on, because I know it's on the same network, and then I scan that network to find the IP of my Raspberry Pi. And we can see there's a few things connected to my network right now, and it identifies the Raspberry Pi already. So the Raspberry Pi is actually this guy right here. So let's see, and it doesn't give me my own. So Nmap scan report, this last one that's me. So this guy right here is so 231. That is my Raspberry Pi, and it identifies it based on the MAC address. It knows it's a Raspberry Pi. Otherwise, you would have to guess and just take all of these and guess which one it is. So I have some Lenovo device connected here. I have a TP link. This is yeah, I should go through and check what each of these are. And this would be so TP link is my router right there. So IP is 1. and anyways, so yeah, Apple would have to be my iPad. And so, all right, so we found the IP for our, it's this right here, the IP for our Raspberry Pi. So now we're going to SSH to it, and to do that we're going to need Putty. So let me see here. I forget what. All right, so nothing I need to. I forgot what even tabs I have open, but nothing I'm going to have to cut out of this video. So anyways, so basically you just search for Putty like this. The first thing that comes up, this is the official site. It's this long, weird looking URL, but this is the correct one. And if you go to putty.org and click on download, it's going to bring you here anyways. So just go here for Putty. And I don't like Putty at all. I prefer using like Console or GNOME Terminal or anything on Linux, much better than Putty on Windows. And I just don't like Putty. I don't know why. It just doesn't feel right. I even like the terminal on Mac OS better than Putty. And that's not to say I dislike Windows or anything. Windows has this pretty slick, I actually like the Windows interface. I actually like the Windows 10 menu a lot. So I'm not a Microsoft hater or anything. I'm not trying to bash Microsoft, and Putty's not even a Microsoft tool. I actually think PowerShell is pretty neat. I have to look into getting SSH installed for that if that's even doable. I have not looked into that. So anyways, I'm gonna just go with the installer, the 64-bit installer. Just download that, and takes a few seconds, but not long enough that I'm likely to even cut this out of the video. So we are, and if you're looking up how to SSH to a Raspberry Pi from Windows, you probably aren't familiar with installing Putty, otherwise you wouldn't be looking that up. So I'm assuming that is, I'm assuming that's relevant. Anyways, click run, next, and yes. So we're just going to let this install here, and then we're going to go search for Putty and pin to start menu. I just like to pin it to the start menu with everything else. I actually really like the start menu. So we're going to click on the icon to launch Putty, and this is Putty. So I guess the first thing I dislike about Putty, I shouldn't knock it too much because it's not terrible. It has all sorts of great features and it's pretty solid and it works great. But with a normal terminal, like on Linux, you just click on the terminal, and even on Mac OS, you open the terminal and you have a terminal on the local system already logged into your local system, and then you SSH out to another system. With this, it doesn't open a terminal on your local system. It SSHs out to the remote system and only then opens a terminal for you. So it's not like you can just open it on your local system first and interact with your local system before connecting remotely. So that's a bit of a pain, and it's just I don't like how it does that. But yeah, it is what it is. There are other options, but this is the default. Like this is the most common thing this is the most common tool that people use on Windows to SSH to things. Like this is by far the most common tool. So I'm gonna just put this in here, and I'm just gonna name the session after the same thing. You know, the same as the IP address, because I'm not feeling creative. Save the session so later I can just double click on it. And I like to change the colors just because yeah, that's just how I am. So I'm going to take the time to do this. Apologies if you just wanted me to get to showing you how to use this. So I'm going to make the foreground green, and the background I believe should already be black by default. So just green on black is easy on the eyes. So change that to green and save the profile again. And let's try opening it. And this asks us, hey, this says we don't recognize the fingerprint, and that's expected because we've never connected to this host before. So now if we had connected to it before and it came up with this alert, it might look like something funny is going on and there are hackers on our network or whatever. Not going to get into detail on that in this video, but the first time you ever connect to it, it's going to come up with this, and you just say yes, it's okay. So now you're going to type in your username. So default name is Pi. I'm still using that username on my Raspberry Pi, so Pi, and then type in your password. And there we go. We're logged into our Raspberry Pi. And this is our green on black coloring, so that is nice and everything. So clear, you know, you can run your basic Unix commands, uptime. So it's been up for a little while. It's just sitting here plugged in, connected to Wi-Fi. I've been connecting to it from my iPad and my Android phone. There's a little bit of info on the system. I don't know. There you go. You can look at your CPU info, whatever else. But yeah, here we have our fully functional command line on so here's our fully functional command line. We're connected to it using Putty. So this is not a bad terminal. I think another reason that I dislike Putty is that I just use it on a lot of Windows desktops at different companies that I work for, and they tend to be configured really horribly. So generally the experience on any work Windows desktop is pretty terrible, whereas this desktop is mine and I've configured it myself, and it looks and feels really nice and performs nicely. So there's that, I guess. So I guess the experience is a little bit nicer on my own desktop. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You basically install Putty. So to find your Raspberry Pi, you're going to install and use Nmap, and Nmap is the front end GUI for Nmap. And this is the command you would run if you were on the command line. Update it for your network. So use the Nmap GUI to find your Raspberry Pi. And if it didn't happen to figure out which one is the Raspberry Pi, you can just check each one of them. And to connect to it, you use Putty. So just search and grab Putty from the official site and download it and launch it, put in your IP address and everything and connect to the server. You'll have to make sure your Raspberry Pi is configured to accept SSH connections before you do this. So you'll have had to have done that before. I'm going to include that in the main video where I'm going to have a combined video where I cover connecting to it from all different systems and where I show how I set up the Raspberry Pi itself. But if I happen to create a separate video, I haven't decided if I'm going to make this connecting from Windows video a separate small video without showing how I set up the Pi. But if you're watching this video and you haven't seen me and you didn't see how I connected to or how I set up SSH on the Raspberry Pi, just go back and look at my other videos. I'm definitely going to have one in there that shows you how to set up SSH on the Raspberry Pi. It might be the larger compilation video, but just I haven't decided. I'm recording a ton of these videos at once, and I haven't published any of them yet. So I haven't done any of the video editing or anything yet. But yeah, just take a look at that. Look at the other videos I've published. There's a lot more information on the Raspberry Pi. So if you found this helpful at all, give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button. If you want to, and you can also just hit that bell icon just so you see just so you get an alert when any of my other videos are released. And if you have any questions, just leave a question down in the comments below. You have any comments, criticism, anything you want to say, anything you want to let me know, just leave a comment down below. I want to hear what you think. And I try to get back to all comments if I have time. I don't have a ton of them yet, so probably I will be able to respond to every comment. But hey guys, today we're going to learn how to find the IP address of our Raspberry Pi and also connect to the Raspberry Pi using SSH. And we're going to do this from my iPad. So if you want to connect to your Raspberry Pi from an iPad, this is how you do it. And we're going to use two programs. We're going to use Terminus as an SSH client to connect to the Raspberry Pi, and we're going to use Fing, which is a port scanner that I found on the App Store. And there are a few different ones you could choose. I happen to just pick this one. It's free and looks pretty good, or it does work fine. I tested it out before this video. So let's first open Fing. The reason to do this is just to we're going to find what the IP address of our Raspberry Pi is. And it is also important to make sure you're on the same network. In this case, we're connected to the same Wi-Fi AP. So make sure you're on the same network as your Raspberry Pi. Like don't connect to wireless if your Raspberry Pi is connected to a wireless network, or don't connect to the wrong Wi-Fi network. Like if your Raspberry Pi is on the wired network, your iPad is only going to be on Wi-Fi. You're not going to be able to reach it. So just keep that kind of thing in mind. And from here, I'm going to say scan for devices. So this is pretty straightforward, and I'm going to say continue without permission because I don't need it to know where I am. Now we can see already it's spotted a few devices. So you see it's spotted. I don't know why it took away that info about at first it was showing Mulberry as my iPad, which it is, and now it's suddenly just stopped showing that. But the first one is TP-Link, that's my router, and there's a few other hosts connected here. And the one at the bottom here, generic, it's 192.168.0.231. Now that's my Raspberry Pi. Now I happen to know that because I connected to it from a few different devices already. So this is like the third or fourth device I've connected to it from today. But if I didn't know that off the top of my head, I would check each one of these. Now Mulberry I could rule out. It gives me the name so I know what it is. And Archer A7 and TP-Link, that is, that one up here, that is obviously my router. So you could rule those two out, but if you didn't know otherwise, you would have to check the 4 other devices on this list. You'd have to check all these generic devices, 106, 110, 111, 231. You'd have to check each one of them to figure out which one is your Raspberry Pi. So, I mean, it would take 4 shots basically. And if you look down here, I know one of the port scanners I used, I forget which OS it was on. I think it was Nmap on Windows, actually told me which one was the Raspberry Pi. It was able to figure it out based on the MAC address. But if I click over here, let's see if it gives me any, so I guess it can't get the MAC address yet. All right, so that is interesting. I could find open ports on this if I want. Not on your currently connected to while this device was found. Okay, so I guess it scanned while I wasn't. Okay, anyways, no point poking around with that. You could scan the ports if you wanted to check which one has port 22 open, and that would be that's the SSH port, so it's probably our Raspberry Pi, unless you have other SSH servers on your network. Now, so that you're also gonna, I should mention, you should make sure that you have SSH enabled on your Raspberry Pi before you try to connect to it remotely over the network. So the first time you connect to it, connect with a keyboard and monitor and enable SSH there, and then come back and connect to it remotely over the network. And you don't need to keep the keyboard and monitor connected to it once it's set up on the network and it has SSH enabled. Now, this video I'm recording today is going to be a standalone video by itself, showing you how to do this on an iPad, but it's also going to be part of a larger video that shows you how to set up the Raspberry Pi, how to enable SSH, and how I'm going to have all of these combined. I'm going to show you how to do this from Android, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, everything. So I'm going to have a big combined video, and what you're seeing now is going to be part of that video, but it's also probably going to be a standalone video by itself. So if you didn't see me show you how to enable SSH on the Raspberry Pi in this video yet, if you don't see that in this video, it means you're watching the one only for iPad. And you're going to want to go check the other video that I have that includes all the different, connecting to the Raspberry Pi from every platform, and it also shows you how to enable SSH on the Raspberry Pi. So go back to that video and check that. If you haven't seen that in this video, it means the clip I'm recording now is going to be used in both videos. So if you're on the smaller video, just go check out the larger video if you happen to be interested in those other platforms, or if you happen to need to know how to enable SSH on your Pi before connecting. But right now we're assuming you've already enabled SSH on your Pi. So we're going to click on Terminus. And this, all right, I don't need to see this. All right, so I have a couple different hosts. I have a couple hosts saved in here so far. Hypersnail is just a host on DigitalOcean. And this one, it has a little Raspberry icon next to it because it recognized it for me. I guess Terminus can recognize that it's running Raspbian, but this is the IP that we found in the port scanner. It's 192.168.0.231. So I've already saved this because I tried this out earlier today. So you click on this, and let me cancel this for a second. Had I not had this configured ahead of time, you would have to go ahead and add a new host. So let's say if this was your first time doing this, I believe click that plus mark and say new host. And then you would just basically have to put in a host name, which is, for the host name, you're just going to put in your IP address. And I believe alias is just a nice name to know it by. And that's all you really have to do. Change the port if you're using a different port, but otherwise, and you could put in like a username and password to save that, but I didn't. So that's how I added that the first time. Now that it's added, it's already in there and I've saved it here. So I'm going to use this one that I saved. And I'm going to enter the username. I'm still using the default Raspberry Pi username, which is Pi. So I'm going to connect with that. It asks me my password. which I'm going to have to edit this out of the video. But anyways, there we go. There's my password. And if you're watching this, it means I have edited the part where I actually typed that on the keyboard out of the video. And if I remember it. And let's see here, connect. And there we go, we're logged in. Now, if you logged in the first time you log in, it's going to give you a little message saying, hey, we don't recognize the fingerprint. Do you really want to connect to this? Just say yes. Now, if it's not your first time, it means something funny is going on, and there might be people trying to, there could be, you know, hackers on your network, or something's going wrong. So just be aware of that. But the first time you log in, it's going to give you a little message saying it doesn't recognize the fingerprint. You'll have to either hit yes or type yes. But in any case, I've already logged in, so it does recognize the fingerprint. So I'm logged in with no problem. So I am logged in to my Raspberry Pi as the user Pi. So let's just run a few quick commands just to test this out. So you could say uptime and hit return. And it shows you how long it's been up for 2 days, 43 minutes. Now, you could use you know, all your standard. This is actually a pretty convenient keyboard. It's not perfect, but they laid it out nicely for people who are using for SSH. So this is different from what you'd get if you were using like the text editor on iOS. So we'll just try this out, see how. And you can make the keyboard go away. See, let's check the output of top. So this is how it looks on the iPad. It's logged into our. I mean, this would be the same on any Linux host you log into from the iPad. But the iPad gives you a nice view of it. So this is with my phone. I'm not able to see all of the columns here, so it kind of cuts it off. So this is a little bit better to manage a Raspberry Pi than my phone. And if I had a physical keyboard, this would be amazing. But I actually haven't tried that out, so I'm not sure if you would still be able to type without getting this this keyboard here. So anyways, you can do normal things like you can start typing a command, and you can hit tab like you would on the command line. And there's a lot of different things. But let's say if you type part of a command, hit tab. Yeah, so you can tab it out and get suggestions. And it makes it kind of convenient for you, putting all these buttons at the top here. You can hit control and it stays highlighted then until you type a character, so you don't have to hold it, which is nice in VI. And it looks like it's lagging a bit here, which is unfortunate. I haven't had much issue with it lagging, and unless something just happened to my Pi. No, I mean it's still running, so. Yeah, maybe I'm having network issues, but yeah, I was going to take a look at the CPUs and do a uname command and a few other things, but it looks like this thing is frozen on me. Let me try just disconnecting this and reconnecting. So let me see if I can log back in, and if it cares. That is strange that it has to freeze on me like that. And I'm going to have to edit my password out twice now. All right, so here we go. We are back in. So it for whatever reason, it just froze up. Maybe the client, I'm pretty sure it's not the server on the Raspberry Pi. So maybe this the client I'm connecting with just has issues for some reason, or who knows, maybe there was a disruption in my Wi-Fi or something. I'm not sure the reason for that, and no need to speculate. It's just it's transient, so we're good. So I am logged back in, and we can even use, like, let's see how VI looks over this. So VI, our this blink file, and we can hit tab it out instead of having to type it, and there we go. We can edit code in here using VI if you like using VI, but you can actually edit our Python code, you know, from our iPad on our Raspberry Pi, which is pretty neat. This is a script that I made for another video, where I showed how to make a LED blink from. So this is the code to make a LED blink on the Raspberry Pi. So I did another video where I just demonstrated some of the basics of the GPIO pins and stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, just check out some of my other videos. I have another video on how to do this. If that's the kind of thing you're into, you might want to hit the subscribe button. You might want to hit the little bell icon, and or just, you know, check my channel and scroll through my recent videos. I'm probably going to have that really close to the same time I publish this video that I'm making right now. So anyways, if we want to get out of here, it's a little bit more tedious than it needs to be. So by default, it doesn't have a colon here. We have to type colon. So this is a combination of the tediousness of VI and the tediousness. Not that VI is all that bad if you have a real keyboard, but let's say right quit, or in our case, we just want to quit. So on this keyboard, it's not perfect using things that use keyboard shortcuts. You can do the basic stuff pretty fine. You can get around and manage things. And using VI is not bad, but it's not as good as having a real physical keyboard in front of you. What else do we want to look at? So uname dash, and we got dash up here, uname. So there we go. Raspberry Linux, Raspberry Pi, ARM v71. So that's the Raspberry Pi 4. Has this is that a 71 or 7L? Anyways. All right, so here we are doing a screen capture on my Android phone. Now we're switching to this terminal application. I'll probably put if you check the description, I'll probably have a link to this application there. Now here we can actually do package install open SSH, and just hit Y for yes. So I'm installing SSH on my Android phone through the terminal app. So instead of installing an actual app from the App Store, I installed an app for the terminal, but so the terminal is an app, but once you launch the terminal, you can use that package command to install OpenSSH directly, so you don't need a special SSH program. Now you see here, I'm just typing SSH in the IP address of my Raspberry Pi. Now this is going to fail. I'm recording the audio afterwards, but this is going to fail because I didn't type in the username, and it's just trying to log in as the current user that I'm logged in as on my Android phone, which is just this random looking thing. It's like U0A211. So that's not going to work at all. So let's see here. I'm going to try it again here, and yeah, there's no good way to move the cursor on in this terminal, or at least as far as I can tell right now. So anyways, just backspace that all out, type in the default user Pi, which is what I'm still using on my Raspberry Pi. And then I type out the IP address again. And there we go. Type in my password, which is not showing up. Oh, there we go. It is showing up on the screen. I'm going to have to censor that out. And there we go. We're logged in. So, yeah, just run the uname command. Just going to run a few commands here just to, you know, test things out and see how neat it is to access my Raspberry Pi from my phone. So there we see we're running on a Raspberry Pi. We can tell that much from that login. And this is me. Oh, and here I'm showing you how I found it. So this is an actual app that I installed, the network scanner. I'll have a link to this in the description, or if you check the description, I'll have a link to my write-up, which will have a link to this app that I used here, probably, when I get around to updating it. But in any case, I'll probably have this video posted before I update that page, but I am going to have a link in the description to a page that has all the details from this whole video. And so that tool was just it's a network scanner tool, and when we just found the IP address of our yes, we just used this to find the IP address of our Raspberry Pi, and I already knew the IP address, but if you didn't, you would want to use that tool to find the IP of your Raspberry Pi. So but anyways, that's just if you wanted to find the IP of your Raspberry Pi, and if you didn't know it. So yeah, anyways, here's just a few commands. Like we run the last command, see who's logged into the Raspberry Pi, see how long it's been up for. And yeah, it hasn't been up for very long in this video anyways. We can check the CPU info by cat proc CPU info. It'll tell us, you know, how many cores and stuff are on our Pi. So we see it's like a 4-core system, and we can see how fast each core is. It's like 100 Bago MIPS each. And that's a Linux thing. I'm pretty sure that's not a thing in any other OS, but Bago MIPS is kind of like like an adjusted, supposedly more accurate way of measuring processor performance. And let's see here, check the RAM, I guess. So free-h. And there we go. So we have some, I have the 4 gig model of the Raspberry Pi 4B that we're logging into here. Hopefully you enjoyed watching. Give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below if you have any comments, criticisms, questions, whatever you want to tell me, anything you want to ask, just leave a comment down below. Hit the subscribe button for more content like this. Hit the little bell icon if you want an alert anytime I make a new video, so it'll alert you when I publish new videos. We're going to see a lot more content like this coming up, and a lot of other really interesting tech content, whether it be servers, code, or whatever else. So stay tuned for that. And as always, hopefully you enjoyed watching this video, and we'll see you next time.